Hello and welcome to the Too Much Apparently podcast. If you're new here, this is a podcast for the deeply feeling, overthinking, emotionally overloaded humans who've been told they're too much apparently. And if you're back, thanks for choosing to sit with us again.
We're Alice and Carly, two therapists who are also just sensitive weirdos trying to make sense of life, healing, and our own brains. This isn't a professional advice podcast. It's more like the messy, honest conversations that happen when you finally feel safe enough to say what you're really thinking.
This space is for people like us, the ones who've been called too sensitive, too serious, too emotional, too intense, and have spent way too long believing that it's true.
Okay, on with the episode.
Today we're talking about being too creative to stay in the lines. For the people whose brains just don't work in straight lines, neat boxes, or tick the right form kind of ways.
Yes, this one's for the non-linear thinkers, the ones who see patterns instead of steps, ideas instead of instructions, and possibilities where other people see rules.
We're talking about what it's like to move through rigid systems, work, education, institutions, when your natural way of thinking is exploratory, intuitive, or creative.
And how being curious, imaginative, or a bit rebellious often gets labelled as difficult, unfocused, or non-compliant, rather than what it actually is.
We'll talk about the psychology of creativity, why conformity is rewarded, and how to survive or gently resist systems that weren't built with you in mind.
Let's get into it. Do you know what this episode immediately brings to mind?
What's that?
Witches.
Ooh, okay. Say more.
Well, when I think of people who are more outside of the box, don't conform to the systems that are around us and act in rebellious ways. And I think when we're saying rebellious, they can be small acts of rebellion. They don't have to be anything huge. It brings to mind people who were accused, and largely women who were accused of witchcraft, because they were seen as odd or strange because they didn't conform, especially as women, to the expected rules and roles that women are supposed to play. And they didn't. And then they were persecuted for that.
Have I spoken to you about this recently?
No?
It keeps coming up in my life.
What?
This kind
You're
of-
going to have to say more.
So I've said to a few people recently, I think women are having a bit of a witchy revolution. I guess just getting back in touch with seasonal rhythms, back in touch with their body, back in touch with their menstrual cycle, like all kinds of things that I think of as witchy. Not like, I think there is also a bit of a revolution. I see on social media actually more content about witches and spells and things like that, but that's not quite how I mean it. I think there's something about what it's rooted in. And also the oppression of witches who were probably just women who deeply understood natural rhythms.
Definitely. No, I have always been into witchy stuff. When I was younger, it was more about witchcraft. But today, it's not about spells or believing in crystals or any of those types of things, which is great for people that do. I kind of still love that, even if it's not something I really lean into anymore. But for me, there is something about witchy things. Witchiness makes me think of sisterhood, and that's why I like it and I'm really drawn to it. And it also makes me think of just being free, being in tune with nature, with other women. And yeah, I love the idea of a bit of a witchy comeback or witchy revolution, because it makes me think of free, rebellious, independent thinking women.
Yeah. Real wisdom is what I think about. And I feel like I've often questioned like why we do things or why the rules are this way. And not from a rebellious place, but from a curious place. And I feel like at the moment, there's really an awareness of it feels like the world is set up to ultimately please a very small number of billionaires. That all of these structures and systems ultimately are for them. And it feels like it's intensely uncomfortable at the moment, this real struggle over all different kinds of rights.
Yeah.
And also there's something in it that the word that comes up for me is excites me. And I really don't want people to think that I'm dismissing the struggle, the agony of having to fight for basic human rights. I don't mean it in that way, but I think the excitement is knowing that we have made progress in the past and desperately hoping that this fight will come right and that we will be able to live in a fairer society in future.
Mm.
I'm
Oh,
thinking
gosh, yeah. I
about
certainly hope so.
I'm thinking about women having eventually got the vote. And I just finished reading a book last night that was about mothers in the 80s. And if they separated from their partners because they had started a relationship with another woman and their husband took them to court for custody, 90% of those mothers lost contact with their child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it had like a bit of a thing about the impact of homophobia and then the eventual change in gay rights. And that it feels like there's a backsliding on that. And some of the tools that were used to oppress gay people back then, we can see them being copy and pasted onto trans rights now. But yeah, I just do feel hopeful that we can go somewhere different, that actually more and more people are learning about systemic oppression, that there's just this hope that perhaps we can turn it around. Perhaps we don't need to keep servicing these billionaires nonstop.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I feel like you can carry the hope there for many people, for many people, Alice, because it is hard. I find it hard not to be despairing
Well,
about it at
absolutely.
times.
Yeah.
But I guess we're talking to who this episode is for, almost like we need more outside of the box people who refuse to stay inside of the lines. Because when enough of those voices come together, change, huge change has happened and has occurred. I think what absolutely baffles my mind is how late a lot of this change is. Part of me feels like, does it sound naive of me? I don't know, but I genuinely can't wrap my head around how some laws, practices, beliefs have like literally only recently changed. I'm rewatching Modern Family at the moment because it's one of my comfort shows and I love it. And I've actually recently watched the episode where Mitch and Cam, so they're a gay couple in the Modern Family, where gay marriage becomes legal in their state and they can finally get married. And I'm watching it thinking, how did this just happen and in my lifetime, but also not just in my lifetime like 30 years ago, but not even long ago. Like it wasn't even long ago in my lifetime where if you were gay, you could not get married. I can't even begin to get my head around that, even as an idea or as a thing.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to say because I genuinely can't understand it.
Yeah, it was shocking. So at the end of the book, she laid out some of the facts and about how late it was that homosexuality was no longer considered a mental health condition.
Yeah, it wasn't even long ago.
That was late. But yeah, it did say in this book about it was so 2003 that Section 28 was repealed, which I understand as being the government told schools that they can't teach about gay people at all. So I think for a lot of us, we weren't aware of it because the government decided we shouldn't be aware of it. It is one thing. Civil partnerships were only introduced in 2005 and equal marriage was only 2014.
No, it can't be right.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That it can't be right.
Yeah. And legal access to IVF for same sex couples, that was only 2009.
But yeah, I can't.
Yeah. It makes me think of violence within marriage, such as marital rape. The law on that, it only became illegal to rape your wife in 1993. And also at the moment, we're getting lots of the Epstein files coming out.
Yes.
And what some of that is really making me think about is how normal and acceptable it was to abuse girls and young women.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't you have topless girls on in the Sun that were 16? Have I made that up? Did they have to be 18? I feel like they had to be 16. But
Oh, I don't know about that one.
I just think it was normal. When I think back to being a young woman, and one of my managers at work one day was looking at something in a magazine and it was some kind of cosplay thing, but it was a very revealing costume. very revealing costume of the busty woman. And we were just sat eating our lunch and he just showed me the picture and went, oh, I'd like to see you in something like this.
Oh.
You wouldn't be able to do that anymore. I'd like to think you wouldn't be able to do that anymore. But it never even occurred to me to tell anyone because it was just something that happened. It was just how men were.
It was sadly just the norm. That was our experience.
Yeah.
I can't imagine nowadays a parent sat at the breakfast table reading a newspaper with a naked woman on page 3. Like, just why? Why in the newspaper? I don't understand. I feel I'm going to say this a lot this episode. I don't understand. But I feel like that's part of it because there are so many things that we have done or that were just normal, and so many things that happen today that are just the way that they are, that just make zero sense to me whatsoever. And when you can see a better way of doing things, and I kind of say that with some trepidation because I'm not saying that, I should be Queen Carly and be put in charge of everything. But when you can see a better way that's more compassionate, more with human rights, and that actually serves the people, when you can see that those ways could exist, it's very, very hard for my brain to wrap its head around. But like, why is it not like that then? Why don't we just change that then?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm totally with you on that. Like, why is it like that? And just feeling like kind of mind blown about it all. And, I guess some of this, I'll speak for myself, it is naivety and is being fairly protected and privileged in some ways that actually I haven't had to learn about this. But I guess ultimately what we're talking about is power, is who holds power in institutions, organizations, governments, etc. And I really resist the idea of being a rebel.
Okay.
I really resist the idea of being a rebel because I don't think it is rebellious to want a world where people are afforded basic respect. I don't think that is rebellious. I think it's almost problematic for the people who are arguing for basic human respect to be considered rebels.
Oh, yeah, it absolutely is. But I think anyone who challenges authority, and if authority has said this is the way it is, and then you're challenging the way it is, you are going to be positioned as rebel.
And I'm just going to rebel against that.
So you are the rebel. You're rebelling against rebelling.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if we bring this all down to a smaller scale, one of the things that comes to mind is school. And one of the first experiences that we have of hierarchies and authority, and being told you inherently have to respect your elders and the people at school, and the children who comply with all of that, and the ones who don't, and the ones who don't typically rebel, naughty, all of those things. But it's like, when you hear of children who have been told off for correcting the teacher, but the child is right, and they get into trouble for it. How or why on earth would that be a thing? Why would that child not be praised and encouraged to to do that? But I'm going to get on my sort of conspiracy soapbox, but they don't want us to learn how to question authority. They want us to just accept kind of what we're being told. But if you're a child at school who challenges, why do I have to respect you, but you don't always show respect back to me? Or why are you allowed to do that as a teacher, but I'm not as the student? Why can I not correct you? Or have you seen sometimes those posts that go around on social media where it's been like a test question and a child's put like a really clever answer that's not actually the answer, but it's really clever, and there's usually some snarky teacher comment next to it. You never know if they're real or not, but they still really make me laugh because I just think surely you would award that level of outside of the box thinking and creativity.
Yeah, but it's just not, is it? And Michael Rosen's got a brilliant poem. I think it's a poem about it. And he talks about that. He talks about, you are taught as a child in school for the purpose of passing the test. So when the test says what grows on trees and the answer is leaves, if you write apples, you're wrong. And I think it is that kind of thing. And I think you're right. And part of me is like, I can kind of understand it from a social cohesion perspective of, I'm just thinking about the poor teachers. Like if critical thinking was amped right up, just all these teenagers asking questions all over the place and pulling apart the meaning of life and all of our social structures, it would be chaos. So I can understand it to some extent. And also, I think we've lost our way. I think a lot of it goes a little bit back to what we were talking about in the last episode about self-awareness and thinking about people defending against things that they don't want to know about themselves. So I think sometimes it can take a certain kind of person. I think it's almost, I don't know if this is factual, but I think like there's a higher rate of narcissists among CEOs. Does that sound about right to you?
Yep, certainly heard that. And psychopathy.
Yeah. So there's going to be a type of people that go for these powerful positions, probably because they're not crippled with self-doubt. And therefore, you're going to come up against, they're not open to challenge, they're not open to change. They just want things done their way and often in a way that benefits them rather than the whole system.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're always going to get certain people drawn to roles that contain power. And I think the ones who seek power for more, less selfish reasons are usually pushed out of those jobs or don't end up really getting them. Yeah, but I guess when we're thinking about outside of the box thinking and non-linear thinking, there are terms that I've come across in the past where I've had to be like, oh, what does that mean? But once learning about it, definitely recognize that I think in that way. My mind definitely isn't non-linear, and I can see where other people's is quite linear from one step to the next to the next. But I definitely understand my thinking is kind of shooting off in lots of different directions. I certainly observe you doing the same, where it's suddenly like there are several threads and we're trying to pull on all of them and bring them all. Which one do I go down and bring them all together rather than, oh, that's made me think of this one thing and this one thing and this one thing, which I think is why we can end up on tangents because there are just several thoughts going on at the same time. So I definitely relate to non-linear thinking. And also, rather than thinking in steps, I know I think in larger systems as well. I'm a very visual thinker, and I tend to have my thoughts tend to be quite big ideas and very detailed. Big ideas and very detailed. And yeah, I guess when I compare that to how I know other people around me do things, I do recognize a difference.
So that feels like both ends of the spectrum. So like the kind of overarching big idea and then also lots of detail within that. And I think sometimes I feel like people tend to get put in one box or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's more that I have really big thoughts and really big ideas, but I'm a details person. I think that's what leads to all the rabbit holes.
Yeah.
And again, I think if you are an outside of the box thinker, you are more likely to find yourself going down all of those different kind of rabbit holes. And I think when you think that way, you do end up finding yourself with lots of different perspectives, and it aids being able to be a critical thinker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's taking me back to the why questioning and what you said on the last episode about never growing out of that why stage. And I've not really thought of myself kind of in those terms, but I can see myself in them. And like my eldest daughter, I can really see that need to know why. Like, why is it like this? Why is the rule like this? Like, why am I being asked to do this? Feels like an additional step in getting the job done is needing to understand why first.
Yes.
But that doesn't go down well in schools, in workplaces.
Well, some people do just accept that. If someone just says, "Why is the sky blue?" Like, because it is. So, all right then. Like, some people are happy and don't need to understand to accept something as it is. Same with, well, that's just how we've always done it. Some people do just accept that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think other people might be like, oh, well, all right then, and kind of maybe question it a bit, but think, well, that's just how it is. Whereas for me, gosh, being in the bureaucracy of the NHS and the way things were ran, I would still be like, yeah, but why? Why don't we just change it?
Mm.
Okay, but that doesn't really make sense though. What if we did it like this? Yeah, but why do we do that? Why don't we do it like this? I would never just reach a point of, well, all right then, fine. I would constantly be giving feedback about, why don't we do it like this? Or why don't we look at it like that? And at the time, I really believed in my ideas, and that if someone were to hear it, they'd think, oh, why haven't we thought of that? And they'd implement it. Like, I genuinely believed that so much. And it's only now that I look back where I just think, oh, I must have annoyed so many managers. There goes Carly, like piping up again.
It just makes me feel sad. It just makes me feel like there's so much potential for society to work better in so many ways. And it just doesn't. And I'm thinking about some of the difficulty that I've come up against. So I don't know what the right term is now, but I'm thinking about like school avoidance, emotionally based school avoidance, that kind of thing. And I was literally thinking about this the other day. So I would struggle to get one of my children into school. It was a real struggle. It was a really distressing time. And then she would go to school, and in order to stay focused on the lesson, she would doodle in the edge of her page. So then she'd get a detention. And then we had it again when we went to college, and it was like she could go to all her lessons, but she could not stand the tutorial at the beginning of the week. So I said, can she just not go to the tutorial? If you send us the whatever resources that you've done in that lesson, if there's anything important that she needs to do, let us know. And it just met with, no, this is compulsory. This is what it has to be. And ultimately, she left college. And it's just the damage that's done with
It
some
just
of
makes
these
you want
rules.
to bang your head against the wall, doesn't it? Like not doing an A level in your tutoring class. Like why does it matter?
Yeah. And I think that's it. It just, when it just feels like it doesn't matter, it's like silly things. So I used to work in a call center for a delivery company, and they would say the parcel will be delivered by 7. So if a customer called up at 6:58, we'd have to say it will be there by 7. Just like robots. And it was horrible. And I hated it. I really hated it. And I felt like I was lying. And there probably was the odd time where the van pulled up as we were finishing the call, but I would get penalised if it was 6:58 and I put through a message to the delivery centre to say this person hasn't received their parcel yet. Yeah, I really don't like it. And another big way that this kind of thing shows up for me is around religion. So mainly around Christianity, because that's what I'm most familiar with. And I don't consider myself religious, not Christian. But I think I'm much more Christian in the way that I live my lives than many people who profess to be deeply committed Christians. And I just find that so confusing of like, they hand down these rules, like they use the Bible to justify why things have to be the way that they say that they should be. But like, if Jesus turned up on their doorstep, they'd send him away. They'd say he was an immigrant and send him away. And you can't then claim to be a Christian. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
It is how it works, but it shouldn't be.
That's not how it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
Well, I think religious institutions are a good example of this. And if you don't, I guess with any institution, if you don't conform, I think you're ousted. You're ousted out. People want people to conform. But the truth of the matter is they try and tell you differently. I can't tell you how many jobs I've been interviewed for where there has been a promise of innovation, wanting your ideas, wanting your feedback, wanting innovative leaders. And I'm like, great, finally someone that wants to hear what I've got to say and is going to do something about it. And they talk the talk. They say that's what they want. But then when you actually get in the job and you do it, it's not what they want at all.
Yeah. And I'm thinking this even happens with therapy training institutions. This also happens with therapy membership organizations. I have to force myself to respond to those surveys because it's important to have a voice. But the entire time I'm filling it out, I just feel like they're not going to change anything. They're not going to do anything different. They're just going to do what suits them and pick and choose the feedback to fit. That's a very cynical viewpoint, isn't it? But I guess that goes back to what we were saying before about like hope and despair. That I like the hoping in me feels a bit like a rebellious act sometimes.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, to give in to the despair feels like giving in to the propaganda in a way. In some to some extent. So yeah, I will make myself speak up about things.
Yeah. But then if you are someone who rejects conformity and just complying, you do have to, yeah, you're then left with the consequences of that. And
Yeah.
there are consequences of that. Because, like I said, I think creative people, people who think outside of the box or think innovatively, are praised for being that way. But I don't think it's really what people want. I think, I want you to be innovative, but only within these exact confines of this box. And if you step out of that, we don't like that. We still want to keep you, we still want to be able to have you conform, but in this box that we've agreed is okay for you to. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore.
Well, it feels like you're searching for a word, and I feel like there are so many words. Like, if you don't conform, you're bad, you're wrong, you're rebellious, you're unhelpful, you're a troublemaker, you're a problem. There's so many words that can fit in there. And I think you touched on a really important point about the cost of being this way.
Yeah.
And it can feel like a no-win sometimes because to suppress it, I think can be psychologically damaging. To just try and pretend that you don't have these thoughts, that you don't feel this way, that you don't notice various injustices happening, that actually it can be psychologically damaging. But also, if you do speak up, you can lose your job, you can get kicked out of school, you can be excluded from any kind of community that you're part of. Even if you do perform like the values that this institution says that they value.
Yeah. Well, this is going to sound so cynical, but I think organizations talk about publicly what their values are, but I think that's often for show. Like, not always. I have to be careful here of not being a bit too all or nothing. I do think companies might pick values they genuinely believe in or want to strive towards, but I also think people pick the values that look good. Yeah, I don't even know what Amazon's values are, but they're not going to put our top value is greed, profit over people. That's not what they're going to say their values are.
Yeah.
So I think even if you agree with like someone's values, it doesn't mean they're practicing those values, or it doesn't mean they stick with those values if they start to take away from profit. Then it might be a very different picture. And that might be hard for those of us who take people at their word. I think that's what I've found hard when I've been interviewed and I've been told that you've got opportunities to do this, or we want this from you. And it's like, okay, I take that now as fact, as your word. So it's really difficult when then that doesn't manifest. In fact, one of the things I really struggled with. So I spoke last episode a bit about when I did a nursing public health degree. And yeah, in order to do the role I wanted to do, I had to get this degree. And the role fundamentally is a public health role. So as part of my course, I had to study the demographics of one specific area and do a whole analysis on the health and well-being of that area and identify where there were poor determinants of health and the types of initiatives and programs that you could put in place in order to help that particular population with this specific thing. It's very much all focused on that and health promotion initiatives, and I absolutely loved it. Then I finished and I got the job. And one of the first things I realized was, we don't get commissioned enough to do any of the public health stuff. And there was actually none of that in practice. All of the health promotion stuff, the work that I thought was really meaningful that I had been literally trained to do, was then like, we've got no time for that. And actually, we're not being funded for that. We've just got to be reactive and do X, Y, Z. I was like, but I don't understand. You've just put me on this course to learn how to do it and then say, yeah, we don't do that. We don't do that.
Yeah, and there is some really good research, and I can't even remember where I read it now, but I think it was a study done in America, and they realized that for every $1 they spent on public health initiatives, they saw a $6 return. So this is one of the things that really, really confuses me. Because actually, when we stop investing in health, education, early years, it costs us more as a society in the long run. It's so short-sighted. And, that's the US, but I'm fairly sure it would be the same over here. But I think the fact that we exist in 5-year government terms means there's no incentive for them to go for something that's going to come to fruition in 15 years' time, because probably they're not going to be in power then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that really hard to accept. I think about therapy. So I work solely in private practice. I would love for the state to pay me instead of people having to pay me, so that as many, and not just me, but like there's a whole army of therapists out here that have been trained that could do so much good in the world if only the investment was there. And it really frustrates me, this idea that there isn't enough money, because I just don't buy that. I just don't buy it.
No, we're not poor. There's money.
No,
There's money.
right.
Yeah.
And if every pound we spent generates, even if it only generated £2 return, you've doubled your investment.
Yeah.
Like, that would be an insanely good investment.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you see the world this way, when you question, well, why don't we just do this? Or that makes so much more sense. Why don't we do it like that? I think it's really difficult because I have struggled a lot with powerlessness. And whether that is on a global scale of feeling powerless about decisions that are being made across the world and the way in which they're impacting humanity, or whether it's decisions that are being made in your workplace that are impacting your colleagues, when you can question and see that there could be a different way that would genuinely be better. Not pie in the sky ideas, but sometimes very simple, very implementable ideas. And you have no power ultimately to do anything about it. It's crushing.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess when you don't have that level of power, you're more likely to be on the front line, seeing how these small decisions are impacting real people's lives. Whereas when you're 2, 3, 4, 5 levels of management up, you're probably in a cushy office, not really being confronted with what's going on. So it's easy to deny or dismiss the impact of your decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's definitely true.
Mm.
If you're relating to this episode, if the type of person we're talking about and you're thinking, yes, that's me, I certainly know I relate to most of what we're talking about. I can also say what has happened as a result of that. And that is when you don't conform, or when you don't have the power to then do anything about it, and you feel like you're always the one pointing things out or speaking up. I think if it can't go outward because change can't happen, then the only way for it to go is then inward. And I think that's where I certainly have had messages of, again, I'm being too much. I'm always the one in the meeting, kind of putting my hand up and pointing things out. And it can start to feel like you are then wrong, or you should just be like everybody else. Not everyone will relate to this. Some people may have dug their heels in further, perhaps. But I think over time, I have then tried to make myself sound less intense, or edited myself to sound a bit more palatable, or trodden very carefully about the thing that I want to say. I think it's easy to, start to lose your voice, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, even as you're saying it, I can just hear like the tone of your voice dropping down and becoming flatter. And that's really how it feels, that feeling of I can't change anything. And, partly my mind's moving to like, what can I say that might be helpful here for listeners? And Actually, I think it's quite hard. Part of it for me is being self-employed. So I set the rules in my business and I work in the way that I want to work. And part of the reason that I have chosen not to work in employment is I don't want to have to limit myself to other people's ways of working.
Mhm.
I just don't think I could do that, especially in this type of work. I just don't think I could do it.
I think being self-employed is a bit of a rebellious act.
Yeah. And also I know that, that isn't the only solution for society, because if everybody was self-employed, if everybody as a therapist was charging a fee that makes being a therapist actually sustainable, so many people would not have access to therapy. So I'm also
Mhm.
extremely grateful to people that do work in charities and in organizations where people can access therapy for free and for very low cost. Yeah, I guess this is another one of those things where there is no easy answer, as again, just wanting to be able to say, right, well, for all of these areas of systemic oppression, here's your ABC tick list of what to do. And there isn't one. Vote. Vote for people that best represent your interests. Vote in local elections, vote in general elections, be as engaged as you can. And I think there is a balance, as there is with any kind of social change, between pushing for change and looking after yourself.
Hmm.
That if you're constantly pushing yourself, you're probably going to burn out, probably going to become quite depressed and demoralized. So you're going to have to insert some frolicking in.
Oh, you do love to use that word.
Yeah. Yeah. And if anybody hasn't heard me say that word on these episodes before, but maybe listen to some other episodes. I'm not wholly being flippant there. Yeah.
Yeah, I try to remind myself that when I'm thinking that it's hard to be this way in the world, a sense of powerlessness can accompany it, or oh, nothing's really ever going to change. I do stop and I do remind myself that history does show again and again that progress does come from those who questioned the rules, questioned the norms, questioned authority, and just kept going, just banging that drum. So it can really feel like things just aren't ever going to change. But I think it's important to remember that all of the significant change that we have today has come from voices like ours, like yours, if you're relating to this episode. And we have to take care of ourselves and we might have to take breaks.
Yeah.
But we can also keep on going, because what would happen if everybody who does not conform and who thinks outside of the box just decided to stop?
Yeah. 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 Really, really important points. Really important points.
Well, what are some of the ways we can more quietly rebel? So there's this idea of rebelling on a big stage with where we're tackling systems of oppression, which is obviously pretty large. But I think that there are lots of quieter or micro moments of non-conformity or rebellion that maybe help us live inside of the rigid world that we live in. It's kind of making me think of some of the ways that I might do that. But you already kind of mentioned like self-employment a bit in terms of not having anybody as such to kind of answer to. Yeah. Are there any other ways you live your life that feel like a quiet rebellion to the way people you're told you're supposed to be?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I think self-employment feels like a massive one, actually. It's a huge undertaking to be self-employed, and especially as a therapist. I think my immediate family structure is one. And actually, sometimes this can feel uncomfortable for me when I'm talking with other women or other mothers, because there's loads of discussion around, be it like lazy husbands who don't pull their weight and things like that. And so I've been married twice. I'm currently married. Purposely, part of my decision is this a hands-on father? So, that's absolutely one of the ways. Encouraging mothers to rest, and women to rest in general, and mothers particularly to rest, feels like a rebellion, to not be the one who has to do everything all of the time. That actually, as mothers, it's important for us to teach our sons and daughters that mum's not going to do everything. Mum needs to have her own life. Mum is her own person. I think there's things like that as well. They're the first couple of things that come to mind. How about for you?
Yeah, no, I loved listening to those. Well, funnily enough, the things that popped into my head were work related and then feminist related. So it made me think we should almost have a full feminist episode. I think we need to do it justice. Write that down after the podcast. But yeah, so from a work and living perspective, probably for like 10 years, apart from for studying, I've worked 4 days, not 5. And that has felt like a quiet rebellion to me. I remember being asked a couple of times by different people, like, why do you only work 4 days? You don't have children. Kind of like the only reason to work 4 days would be if you had like other responsibilities, rather than because I want to, because I value my time and work-life balance. And so I've always tried to not work full time. Don't get me wrong, I still work enough. Thank you very much. But yeah, that's something that's felt like a bit of a rebellion, a thing that people just don't expect you to work part-time just because. Trying to reject hustle culture and urgency culture and just slow the hell down. Yeah, and the same with, I've said to my partner, I said, if we ever get married, just expect that I am going to do a speech because my voice matters in this later. Why do you just like the men give a speech? Like I will be speaking. I don't even like giving public speeches, but I will just to prove a point, and I will go first.
Yeah.
But also just other smaller acts of rebellion is when someone's talking about a certain situation, sometimes I try to assume that they are a woman. If someone says, I saw like the doctor the other day, I'll try intentionally go, oh, was she nice? Did she help you? With roles that typically people would just use he, I just try to actively change them to she as much as possible. I wish we had more time because there could be so many more that I would list off. But I do think there's loads of room in life for micro acts of rebellion, or a way to demonstrate your values, or to promote change that is just on that smaller scale, that who knows who might pick up on that or might change their behavior. There could be ripple effects. And I think it's important to not underestimate those smaller acts of rebellion that we can do.
Yeah, that takes me back to that kind of hopeful feeling, that inspiring feeling that actually, even if we do regularly come up against resistance, that there are pockets of hope. There are small things that we can do. Change will come.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what other people do as well. Please do email us, comment on the episode, or reach out to us. I would love to build a bit of a catalogue of the ways in which people just like to, not conform and rebel in everyday life.
Yeah.
If you've spent your life feeling like you're constantly colouring outside the lines, maybe the problem isn't you.
Maybe the lines were never meant to hold you.
Creativity, curiosity, and non-conformity are not flaws to fix. They're ways of seeing that keep the world alive.
Next time, we're talking about too scared to be seen, when vulnerability feels less like connection and more like a threat.
We'll explore why being visible can feel dangerous, how past experiences shape our fear of exposure, and what it takes to let ourselves be seen without armor.
For now, we'll leave you with this question. What parts of yourself have you been trying to shrink to fit, and what might happen if you let them take up space instead? That's all from us today. If this episode made you feel a bit less alone, the best way to help us reach more people is to subscribe, rate the podcast, and follow Too Much Apparently on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Those simple clicks help other sensitive humans find us when they need it most. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon.